everybody. This is Pastor Tom welcoming you to another study in the Word. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different and talk about my life, which is hopefully going to be interesting enough to get some attention. There's going to be a lot of lessons that we're going to learn because I'm calling this Teaching Wild Times with an Awesome God, being 68 years old and in the ministry now over 45 years. You learn some things, and what I've learned from the Word of God as well as experience will come in to play here as we study. So I want to start off in Jeremiah chapter 29. I'm also going to bring into this not only my history, but excuse me, but how I met my wife, our ministry together, where we've been, how many places we've lived, things like that, and also try to shine the light, if I can do it that way, on the difference between when I was a little boy and today, to try to help people understand how far things have progressed, probably not in a good way. But Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11 says, "For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and pray to me, and I will listen to you, and you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart." Really, literally could be a scripture about my past and me. That's one of my favorite scriptures because it makes so much sense. And then there's another scripture I'd like to share with you in First Thessalonians. If you don't mind turning over there real quick, I'm only going to share a couple scriptures, but it's First Thessalonians, and I wanted to look down at let's see if I can find this right here. Yeah, First Thessalonians. I want to look down here at chapter 5, and let's look at verse 12. "And we urge you, brethren, to recognize those who labor among you and over you in the Lord, and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake. Be at peace among yourselves." So these two scriptures, people don't know me, and it's impossible to get to know somebody, just in a few years or on a Sunday, and so on and so forth. But I wanted to do this so you could get a glimpse into my life, what I like, what I dislike, different things. So I'm going to start off at first. I was born in Klamath Falls, Oregon, and I lived there for 6 months. This is the story of our life. My dad was a produce buyer for Safeway, rose all the way to the top of that profession, and he was so good at it that he got promoted like every 6 months to a year or two or four. This was much like the military. So all the places I have lived, it's interesting because after we came to the Lord and then we got into ministry, we also lived at all these different places. And I'm hoping that we can stay in where we're at now and not have to move anymore. But I've lived in Oregon, Idaho, Burley, Idaho, Moscow, Idaho, Kansas City, Kansas, North Dakota, Bismarck, South Dakota, Chicago, Hammond, Indiana area, Colorado, Monte Vista, Colorado, Texas, Austin, Texas, Nevada. I lived in Reno, Sparks, and Fernley, Nevada. California, I've lived in Aromas, Concord, Pleasant Hill, Lafayette, Sacramento, Chino, Pomona, La Habra, Watsonville, Wisconsin. We've lived in Fish Creek, Sturgeon Bay, and Kewaunee. And when I talk about lived in, I talked about had a home there, had an apartment there, and so on. I think I left out in California, La Habra. No, there it is, La Habra. Okay. So those are all the places that we've traveled. You'll understand this more as I go and talk about this, because my life was going from one place to another, having to get in there, and to a new school, make friends, and then when you get pretty comfortable with your friends and stuff, move on to the next thing, which was very difficult because you tended to get bullied and you tended to get into fights and you had a chip on your shoulder. And that was kind of the story of my life. Now, I want you to think for just one moment, what was the first thing you remember in your life? Was it pleasant? Was it good? Was it bad? For me, it was unpleasant. The first thing I remember in my life was about 5 years old or so. I was living in, I think it would uh, if I remember right, Idaho or something. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I do remember this though. They used to have St. Joseph's aspirin for children. I don't know if you've ever seen those, the little orange pills, aspirins that doctors would prescribe back then anyway, for children who had a fever or something, and um, they came in a bottle. And back then they didn't have the seal-proof caps or the caps that are almost impossible to open like they do today. They would put them in just a regular little bottle, and the cap top would spin off. And so I liked those. I thought they were very good. It reminded me of candy. I thought it was candy, basically. I didn't understand. Maybe medicine doesn't matter anyway because it tastes good. It tastes like orange candy. So we had a little kitchen with cabinets, just like the normal small apartment or house. I can't remember where we were at. And I was big enough to understand how to pull a chair over there, climb up on the counter, open up the drawers. My parents were sleeping. I think it was a Saturday, and they slept in. And I got up and I started feasting on St. Joseph's aspirin for children. And when my parents woke up and walked out, they woke up to quite a sight. Me sitting on the table there with St. Joseph's aspirin for children, orange, smeared all over my face, and running down my little whatever I was wearing. And of course, they went into panic mode at that point. They grabbed me, drove me over to the hospital, went into the emergency ward. First thing I remember is getting my stomach pumped. you know, they stuck something up my nose and something down my throat, and oh, it was a terrible, terrible thing. But I do remember it. I even remember the doctor. So that was my first memory. My second one was a little bit different. My second memory I know was in Kansas City, Missouri, because I remember we were my dad had an apartment at that time. We were upstairs in this apartment complex, and it was bad weather. Thunder, lightning, tornado warning, sirens going off, the whole bit, whole 9 yards. And I had an earache, totally bad earache. And so my dad was walking with me, and he was patting me on the back, comforting me. I remember I was hurting. And I remember the thunder, the lightning, the sirens, and on our black and white TV that was bouncing up and down like this with trying to, they sometimes they weren't very good about, I guess you could say, focusing on one that they would flip a little bit, the black and white TV, and Godzilla was on, and I remember Godzilla. And so, I've always had a fondness for Godzilla, but that was my first memory. So we went for uh, many years, up to about 5 years old, 6 years old. I think I was about 5 or 6 because it was about 1960 when we moved to uh, Colorado, a place called Monte Vista, Colorado, South Colorado, right up against the beautiful San Juan Mountains. What a beautiful place it was. Agricultural place because my dad was working agricultural. A lot of different types of backgrounds. We had minorities, what they would call, we had your black people, Hispanic people, Filipino people, white people, and all kinds of different others, even Indians and stuff in there. And so it was very diverse, is what I'm trying to say. And so we kind of all had to learn how to live together. And that's the one thing I remember about Colorado. Not only was it beautiful there, not only was it a great place to grow up, not only was it fun, but it was also very diverse with different people. So I got to know a lot of different types of people. And it was very fun because we all got along for the most part. I'll tell you the story a little bit where we didn't. But we had 4 seasons there: winter, spring, summer, and fall. The winters were a lot of snow because we lived right under the San Juan Mountains, and sometimes it would snow way much. But it wasn't that cold like it is up here. So when it would snow, it would normally get up into 30, 34, 35, maybe at that time. And then snow would slowly begin to melt. But we always had snow, so winter sports were great. One of the things I remember about back there is we very rarely would spend time in home. All my memories, I mean, I have some from being in the home. My dad had bought a little brick home and on some land, and in the Midwest, even today where we live, you have a smaller home sometimes, but you'll have larger yards. And this house was very small, brick home, red brick home on a large yacht lot. And we even had in our backyards, all of us had incinerators, they would call them, where we would burn our garbage. That wouldn't go over real big today. So it was that, different. And I can remember having to mow that long, and we did not have a riding mower. And we actually did most of it with push mowing, but that's just a thought I had that's unpleasant because I remember that. But anyway, so in the backyard and the house, these houses always, our house was up against a vacant lot that was perfect for baseball in the neighborhood. And then on the other side, we had a neighbor who had a very large yard, and there was a fence, and then the neighbor had a very large yard. And that neighbor had a custom every year in the early winter. He would go out with his hose, and he would spray down his yard and make it into a gigantic ice skating rink. And I can remember back, he did it every year. I don't think anybody cared. I don't think and there was any illegal things about that, or you didn't have, today you just couldn't do that because of insurance. So the whole neighborhood would go ice skating as an example. And I mean, I skated all the time. I got really good at it. I loved ice skating. Those days are gone forever. I lost the ice skating thing. I don't remember, how to do it. I wouldn't even attempt now. But um, the thing about it was that every day we were outside. That's what I was trying to say. Winter, summer, fall, it didn't matter. You know, uh, Spring. We spent time outside. In fact, every spring we would take our shoes off, run around outside a lot so that we could get our feet would get hard, and we could go without shoes a lot. And I know that sounds funny, but that's the way we did it. We toughened up our feet that way. It was very hot in the summer. The asphalt would actually melt and sometimes stick to your feet, and got burned a lot of times doing that. But the roads and stuff were covered with tar. Excuse me. Uh, and you know it was really like stretchy when it get hot, and it was almost rubbery, and on the sides of the road. And so that's kind of the way it was. But we ice skated, we did sledding, we did skiing, and in the winter we threw snowballs at one another, and we had a blast. We built snowmen. We did not spend a whole lot of time inside. I want people to understand this. We had to entertain ourselves without TV, without video games, without internet, without all the things we have today. And it was outside, and it was neighborhood coming together. In the summer, we would play baseball in the lot next door, and everybody would play, and everybody would get to bat. And even if you're a little kid and you wanted to play, we'd give you a bat. So everybody got a bat around. I love that. We did it for hours in the summer and spring and summer. We did a lot of that. We also did a lot of basketball. And we might have a hoop at a house, and the whole neighborhood would go over there, and we'd all choose up sides, and we'd play basketball. And that was what we did. And we would, we'd build forts, we'd build tree houses. We had a fort where we dug down in the earth. It was because it was clay there, a lot of clay. You could do it to where it wasn't dangerous. So we dug a big hole down there. And one of the things that I remember is having this fort where we went down. It was very cool down in there, and then we made little like ledges and stuff where we could put stuff. And if we had candy, we'd stash it. We played like a little club. Me and my neighbor had friends. This place was across the street. I remember it very vividly. In a lot of their home, they didn't do much out there, so we just used it like that. And my neighbors all knew each other. My mom and dad constantly had my mom constantly had the women over. Neighbors came over for whatever they do, coffee, and in the afternoon they would drink coffee and play pinochle and all that. Now, my parents were not Christians, but at that time, almost everybody went to church. That's the truth. So it was a different time. Divorce was almost unheard of. It was looked down upon. Of course, abortion was, that was just was not accepted at that time. Even the thought of that, and so it was so different. So it was really wonderful because marriage was considered um, a very, very important thing. Homosexuality was actually illegal at the age of 18 or older. Most married. Only 28% were single, and if they were single, normally it was because of a death, not a divorce. Oh, and then and then slowly that rose over the 60s and into the 70s and until today. Uh, People wanted to get married, and most of them did get married, like I said, early. And marriage was supposed to be forever, and people worked at their marriage. So divorce was rare at the time. In most families, the husband worked outside the home, and the wife was a housewife. Sometimes she'd work part time, but the full time work for women was very rare. Actually, my mom did that though, but only about 20% of the women had college education at that time. Most of them were raising the children at home, and but I'll tell you what, the crime rate was so low. If there was a shooting or a something in New York City or Los Angeles where somebody got killed, a murder, it made the papers everywhere because it wasn't that common to have shootings and killings and all this. So if something happened, like you say, the mafia got into a fight or something, everybody would know about it, and it would make all the newspapers. And so that was amazing because very rarely did somebody get killed. There was no school shootings. The serial killer thing started back then. I remember it was a shock to the nation. We started understanding that, and slowly, over a period of time, the corruptness that came into America changed, and now we have crime everywhere. You see chaos; it's out of control. So, like this, being raised about out of 100 children, 65 of them had parents that were married. There was very little divorce. Like I said, men did not live as long. Sometimes they passed. But one of the things that I did want to note to you is that the neighbors all cared about each other. We took care of one another. If the kids took off, we would take off for the day. We all were stayed together. We knew what to do if somebody got hurt, and they did at times. We'd come back and get the help. The parents all knew the kids, and the kids all knew the parent, and the kids all were very respectful to parents for the most part. And so gas is 25 cents a gallon. McDonald's cheeseburger 19 cents. Ford Mustang, a nice one, was 3,000. You get one that wasn't so nice for maybe half that. Levi's were $5. Candy bar 5 cents, stamps 5 cents, eggs 57 cents a dozen, and bread was 20 cents a loaf. Of course, if that stuff would pass for bread, like that Wonder Bread. Remember that with the white? The Wonder Bread we would take, ball up and smash, use it like a snowball and stick it to. You could stick it to the wall. That's how nasty that stuff was. Milk was 52 cents a gallon. The medium priced home was $11,000. Income was $5,000 a year average. So this was moving to Colorado. And in Colorado, there was so many wonderful things that I learned, and wonderful things that we did, and wonderful things that we fished. We learned to get along. Well, one of the things that I did, though, that was an interesting thing, was I had a couple friends, and I don't know what I was thinking at the time. Of course, I wasn't thinking. We were little kids, but we were old enough now. Where what I'm talking about, we would like take our transistor radio with us. I love music. Transistor radio became my constant companion. We would go fishing. We would go hunting. We would do these things, with our parents and so on. But one day, I don't know what it was, for whatever reason, I love the mountains. I love the mountains. I loved the going up there to the San Juan Mountains. They weren't that far away. And so we decided, me and three boys. One boy was a mayor's son from a more wealthy family. There was me, who was, came from just a middle class, if not even less than that at the time. And then we had a poverty kid who was a Filipino. So we had all the classes with us there. And I remember we made a decision, and why we did it, I really don't know. But we went to school there with, like Midwest schools are still like that, great big brick buildings. I even remember my first crush on my teacher, Miss Adams. Now I'm 68. I remember very, very well. All the boys were in love with Miss Adams, and she was nice and she was pretty, and so I remember that. And then we also had this very unusual principal. His name um, was his name was Mr. Stewart, and Mr. Stewart was over 7 feet tall, which is extremely unusual for that day and age. And Mr. Stewart was an unusual guy. He ran a tight ship, but the public school system was different than it is today. And so we got, all this stuff. So we decided one day, us boys, that we were just going to run away, take off. We had some knives. We got ourselves some, I can't remember if I had a hatchet. We got ourselves some candy. We had some candy stash that we'd found underneath a tree. We got some money. We bought a bunch of candy. And so we had food, we thought, enough to get us up there. Water, we thought, enough to get us up there. We weren't thinking very far ahead because we didn't even have any heavy coats or anything. It was in the summer, and so we took off. We didn't go to school, and at that time, people really cared about the kids, and if you didn't show up at school, people found out where you were, like Johnny on the spot. They would call your parents immediately. Where is Tommy? Where is Joey? And so they did that. Now, this was a bad, bad thing because Mr. Stewart happened. It was the biggest day of the year where he had meetings for all of the teachers and everything. This is a special thing that a lot of them were going to do, and they were going to have a special meetings that day. It was going to be set up for the afternoon, and there was a lot of work going on, and this was very important. And lo and behold, now Mr. Stewart, along with the school, has to deal with the fact that three little boys are gone, and nobody could find them. They called, they searched. Whose house are they at? They're always at school. Why aren't they at school? And the panic set in. At that time, it would be panic too, because people just this was not usual occurrence at all. So the police were called, and back then it was different. If you called the police, you said somebody's missing, they actually paid attention to it. Like today, you'd have to wait 3 days, make sure they aren't somewhere else or drinking or passed out somewhere. They take that attitude or whatever. But back then, no. And so the police, the sheriff called. They even had a helicopter go up and start looking after a certain amount of time. And so you can imagine Mr. Stewart was very ticked off, and my dad was not happy, and nobody's parents were happy. And but inevitably we got hungry, so we were walking up a street, and I remember there was a place there on the way up to San Juan Mountains, this road that we were on, and we just walked right into this. It was like a little convenience store would be today. It wasn't a convenience store, it was a country store, but I digress. So we went in there, and we got some snowballs and some cupcakes and all that stuff you're not supposed to eat, and all the good stuff that not good for you. And so we had a kind of lunch. And now when we went in there, the shop owner said, "These boys should be in school. Why aren't they in school?" And I think he probably asked us, I don't remember, made up some dumb excuse. So he was smart though. What he did is said, "Okay." And so he saw that we were walking up this particular street, and it was there's only really one way you can go up in there. So what he did, I'm sure he called the police or he called somebody, and the word got around real quick that we were headed up this road. And lo and behold, we're walking down this road, and lo and behold, you know who showed up? My father. Turned the corner, my dad's car. It was bad. Pulled over in the car. My dad was a man of very few words. I remember what he said: "Get in the car." We got in the car. He said, He says, what are you boys doing? We try to explain. That's all he said. He said, okay, I'm going to drop your friends off. Their parents are going to deal with them. Mr. Stewart's going to deal with you when you get to school tomorrow. He said, and then so he dropped them off, and then he dropped me off, and he said, your mother's going to deal with you. He says, I'm going to deal with you when I get home. Mr. Stewart's going to deal with you tomorrow at school. Now you have to understand what this is about, because Mr. Stewart and the people of that time, the teachers had a wooden mallet up on the wall that they would give you whooping with. And we got quite a few whippings, of course, because we're boys. Every once in a while we get a whipping. And so we knew that we were in for a whooping. That's what that meant. They had just got this intercom system, and the intercom system that was all new was going to come into play in a minute. So when they caught us, my dad dropped them off, took me home. He says, you go get your mom deal with you. So my mom, had me drop my drawers, and she had one of those. We had those big trees, willow trees. She had a real good switch where she, could really make it sting. So she a couple, 3 or 4 or 5 times, really didn't hurt that bad. My mom was a small lady, but it stung pretty good. And she said, okay, when your dad gets home, he's going to talk to you about this. Go in your room. So I had to sit there all day, wait for my dad. That was torture. My dad came home, man, he took the belt. My dad only took the belt to me one time that I can remember, but this was the time. And he said, I don't like doing this, but I'm going to do it. And I'm going to tell you why. And he told me why. And then, dropped the doors, bend over, and drove me back to New Orleans, man. I mean, it hurt. And I remember that whooping pretty good. And he says, now put your pants on, get it, or go ahead and get in bed. He says, tomorrow Mr. Stewart's going to deal with you. So I couldn't sleep that night. I'm sure my friends couldn't sleep that night. We were going to have to deal with Mr. Stewart, 7 foot tall. So we went to school the next morning, and I thought, oh my God, we're going to have to get through this Mr. Stewart thing. So we got into the homeroom, but it was Mr. Stewart. We didn't start there. My homeroom, we all had a homeroom. That was a room where we had a teacher that really cared about us and was the first one that we met in the day, and that kind of stuff. And our homeroom teacher we were all in the same class. Our homeroom teacher was mad. And so she took the mallet down off the wall. She said, come here, you guys bend over. Bam, bam, bam. We got swatted probably all the way to, Memphis. So we had that, and it was humiliating in front of the other kids, and everybody laughed and all that, and so we're sitting there trying not to cry. And all of a sudden over the intercom, Mr. Stewart says, well, those 3 boys, and he called our names, come down here. And so we got down there, and he left, he left the intercom on. He left the intercom on, and he gave us the punishment that we deserved over the intercom for all to hear. And I never did run away again, tell you that. But that was the way it was back then. See, different. Everybody had guns. Nobody shot each other. Everybody had knives. People didn't stab each other. But one thing that was occurring at that time was racism. There was racism there at my school. And it wasn't on my part at all, because my parents had taught me different than that. In fact, I had an experience one time where I came home crying because some of the boys I were with, we were throwing snowballs, and there was a black lady up on her apartment looking out, and the boys started calling her names and making funny songs and calling her the N-word. And when they were doing that, something inside tore me up. Something inside of me really hurt. I hated that. I hated it with a passion. I still hate it today. Just to me, it was like they were degrading another human being. That poor lady was crying, and I was crying. I went home and I asked my parents about this, and my parents didn't have any racism, and they explained it to me. They were real good Republicans, and of course, Republicans were the ones that at the time, people don't know this today, but they were the anti-racism, right, political party. The Democrats were the Ku Klux Klan guys and people that did all this stuff to hurt the black folks. And, people don't know that today. You got to go back and check your history. But anyway, I digress. I remember that immensely. And so there was some racism. And one of the things that's began to happen was I was the biggest kid in school, so I was a target. And these boys in our school that were farm workers that went to our school, Hispanic guys, they had a little gang going. That was a big thing, having a little gang. I actually had a little gang too, but it was different. Ours was just a fun thing. Theirs was, they got into mischief and wanted to beat people up. And one of the things they did is they used to try to corner me. They cornered me down there at school, and they cornered me in a corner, and they would beat the fire out of me. And I mean, it hurt. They would hold my arms. I couldn't get loose. It's not like in a Jack Reacher show. They grab you and you can't move, and they're hitting you and they beat you up. I didn't know martial arts or anything else. I was a pretty good fighter, but I didn't understand any of that. But anyway, this was going on, and the principal got wind of it. Somebody told the principal this is going on, and so the principal asked who the key players were, which was me and this boy that was the ringleader of this little group, and he got on. He called a special assembly. He got on the intercom, and he said, "I want everybody out in the yard where we had physical education. There's a grassy part out there. Everybody out there." And so the whole school, all the teachers, all of the kids, we all went out there. And he said, "Now make a big circle." We made a gigantic circle around this dirt part, this grass part. And he said, "Now I want you speaking to me, Tom, and this other kid. I want you, who is the ringleader of these guys that were beating me up, get out there and settle your difference right now." And it was a fight. My principal called a fight. He's a wise man. And so I thought, that was my chance. And man, I wailed on that kid. I mean, and he let me beat him up pretty good. It was bloody. And once I got him down and everything, I quit. We quit. We wouldn't go any further to really hurt somebody that bad. But you got a good whooping. Now I didn't always win fights, but I won that one. And quite a few of them I did win. I lost a few. But here's the thing about that. After we got done with the fight, he made us shake hands. There was something that happened where we became friends. I remember him being a friend, or at least an acquaintance now. And one of the worst things I've ever heard of, and I don't know what it is. I've got some stories to tell about pickup trucks, but his family was going out to his brothers. He had like 7 brothers. Were going out to the fields to work, and they got on a levee. They had lots of levees there in Colorado, like they do in California. And the car or the pickup truck, they're all in the back. Riding, and it flipped into the levee, and all of them were killed. It was a horrible tragedy, and I can remember that boy coming back to school, and he was shell shocked. And I went over with him, and I put my arms around him. We just cried. I cried because it was savage to see that. And so that's how things were. It was, even if we did have fighting and stuff, many times it can be taken care of. And a lot of people, we had to learn to get along. I remember all learning how to go over to somebody's home. It'd be a Filipino guy or a black guy or Hispanic. Got a lot of Hispanic guys, and just learning the different cultures and stuff was good, because it would come in later on in pastoring and so on and so forth. Well, I run out of time in this session. I hope you enjoyed that. That's an introduction. And we're still in Colorado, and we're going to move out of Colorado and head toward California in our next session. We'll see what's going on there, see what happened in our lives. God bless you. Until next time.